following video contains manga spoilers, so if you're an anime only, I suggest you scram!
Chainsaw Man is one of shonen's most unique properties, with its cynical outlook on both society and the human condition, often bringing nuance to an otherwise predictable and formulaic medium. Perhaps what makes Chainsaw Man stand out the most, however, is its use of realism to counterbalance the series' absurd setting with a cast of highly relatable characters. In fact, it's Tatsuki Fujimoto's focus on naturalistic characters that has brought the series praise for its representation of authentic and sympathetic female characters. At least, when it came to human women, that is. Despite Chainsaw Man's measured approach of bringing a sense of authenticity and immersion to its otherwise whimsical world of homicidal, fear-based devils, it was the series' more cartoony characters that truly allowed the audience to lower their guard and fully immerse themselves in Tatsuki Fujimoto's satirical universe. Few characters accomplish this nearly as well as Power, whose immature antics and simplistic worldview not only gave audiences an insight into the perspectives of the average devil, but also allowed the series' human characters to seem more human. Beyond this pivotal role, however, Power eventually transcended her purpose as a mere foil and instead became compelling herself, and dare I say, human. Power's original role in the series could best be described as the token intellectual jabroni. Her introduction in chapters 4 and 5 painted her as an impulsive, brash, and untrustworthy individual, but more importantly, humanized Denji beyond the comedic and dim-witted patsy the previous chapters suggested he was. Denji's attempts to rein in Power's impulsivity showed that he was willing to, at the very least, embody a sense of professionalism, cementing the idea that Denji was not actually an idealized Gary Stu, but instead a real person whose unconventional nature stemmed from a lack of education and socialization. By giving Denji a person to be responsible for, the context behind Denji's perceived ambivalence switched from fanciful and amusing to downright tragic. Power's usage to bring an air of seriousness to Denji's otherwise apathetic disposition also worked to legitimize her as a tangible and somewhat sympathetic character. Though Power's misanthropy and pathological lying were shrugged off as inherent devil-like traits, Power's attempt to rescue Meowie by using Denji as collateral instead suggested a parallelism between her lack of human socialization and Denji's overall lack of class, with Power's affection for Meowie suggesting that, like humans, attachment was something she valued. This meant that, like Denji, Power's mutual distrust of humans stemmed from her inability to find common ground with them, with Aki's annoyance of both Denji and Power's lack of decorum, suggesting that they were both simply misunderstood. Though very on the nose, this framing of Power's early characterization led to a much more profound understanding of Tatsuki Fujimoto's commentary about what it truly meant to be human. You see, as the series progressed, Part 1's plot began to phase out the series' subplots relating to the other Devil Hunters, with Kobeni's secret contract along with any possible resolutions regarding her indentured servitude being dropped in favor of a focus on Denji's relationship to his dreams. Even Aki's quest for revenge was cut short, with Fujimoto choosing to conclude his story by resolving the future Devil's warnings about his eventual downfall, instead of first resolving his dream for revenge. What this choice did was that it not only gave Fujimoto more freedom to explore Denji's progression, but it also created a shortlist of characters that experienced actual character development. Unlike Aki, who died with the same values he held since his introduction, Power did not. As the series progressed, Power's initial distrust of Denji and Aki eventually dissipated, with her becoming more akin to a little sister to Denji, and perhaps even an unruly daughter to Aki. Though this change in Power's characterization didn't necessarily constitute a fundamental change in her values, given that Meowie teased Power's ability to feel affection, it was Power's attempts to compensate Denji for being the reason his vacation was cancelled by letting him drink her blood that demonstrated a substantial change in her overall portrayal. This moment essentially demonstrated that through love and camaraderie, Power was able to change and feel remorse for the very first time. This change, however, was only a precursor to one of the most selfless actions in the entire series. Following Denji's near death and subsequent takeover by Pochita, Power then returned from her apparent death of Chapter 81 to assist Pochita in defeating Makima, Though Fujimoto teased Power's betrayal, Power resolved to overcome her fear of Makima and defied her orders to hand over Chainsaw Man's body, after briefly reflecting on her friendship with Denji. What followed was Power's act of sacrifice in an attempt to save Denji from imminent death. By creating a contract with Denji, Power was able to die in his place as long as Denji befriended the Blood Devil she would eventually reincarnate as. And though Power's contract made it seem like she would eventually return, Power's disclosure that the Blood Devil would not carry over her memories or consciousness made it clear that her sacrifice was final. One of the most interesting details about Power's sacrifice was that its closest analog in the entire series was Himeno's during her attempt to save Aki's life. What makes this parallel interesting is the fact that Himeno was always considered too sane to be an effective devil hunter, with her constant grief over fallen comrades, flying in the face of Kishibe's philosophy to be as detached as possible in the line of duty. It's ironic then that besides Power, the only other character to sacrifice their life for a loved one was a character considered too human to fight devils. The reason Power worked, beyond her use as a foil or comic relief character then, was because she didn't have to be realistic to be taken seriously. She just needed to be believable. And though Power's original use was meant to humanize characters such as Denji and to a lesser extent Aki, what ended up happening was that she instead humanized herself, proving that in the end, being human is not a matter of inheritance, but instead, a choice.